I want to take you on a vacation. Let's go to Mexico for a second. The government of Mexico's average yield to maturity of their debt is around 18 years. 59% of Mexico's debt is 10-year bonds or longer. And in Canada, our average yield to maturity is 6.9, and our 10-year amount of 10-year bonds we issue as a total of our total debt is 33%. During COVID, we issued, well, 60% of the debt we issued during COVID was 3 years or under. That's all renewed now at 4 or 5% interest rates instead of being locked in at, say, 1% for 10 years. That's about, rough numbers, it's about $10 billion a year in extra interest payments. Do you think the government made a mistake during COVID by issuing short-term debt instead of long-term debt?
So first of all, I think the people who are taking a break from their regular activities at this committee, which they're very busy with, are the people who have been filibustering the work of this committee. And I'm very grateful, I sincerely am, that people took a break from that important work that the people of Canada appreciate on filibustering to have this conversation. I would also say it's an interesting choice to contrast Canada's fiscal position, our credit rating, our debt management with that of Mexico. I can assure you there is, well, I haven't talked to every single person in Mexico, but I talk to their government a lot. They would cheerfully trade their position for ours, given our AAA credit rating, which was reaffirmed last week by Moody's. And I'm glad that you're focusing on Canada's debt and our debt issuance, because it gives me an opportunity to highlight an important fact, which is we issued a 5-year global U.S. dollar bond. That's important because the Bank of Canada likes to maintain some U.S. dollar debt.
Respectfully, the question is whether we made a mistake.
You were talking about how we're issuing our debt, and let me just finish my sentence. Let me just finish my sentence. The spread on that debt was 10 basis points. It was issued last month, and that is the lowest spread relative to U.S. Treasuries of any other issuer. That speaks to the strength of Canada's fiscal position and of our debt management.
The truth is, the decision of the government during COVID to issue short-term debt was absolutely negligent, in that it's now costing taxpayers an extra $10 billion a year. You would have extra money to give to Mr. Davies' priorities had you not done that, or other Canadians' priorities. But we'll agree to disagree on that point. Do you know how many people are going to be hired by the measures that are proposed in the budget?
That's a very, very broad question. So what I will say is the measures proposed by the budget, I believe, will increase Canada's growth, will do so in a way that is fiscally responsible and thus allows inflation to continue to stabilize, creating conditions that will allow the Bank of Canada to lower rates. I am very happy to take the opportunity to point out that 1.2 million more Canadians are employed today than were before COVID.
Thank you very much,
I think we're going to
Minister.
see a strongly growing economy, and that will be more jobs for Canadians across the country.
Thank you very much. Every budget bill that comes to this committee, we ask the same question every time, and nobody has an answer, but 25% of the government's savings objectives are actually linked to the shrinking of the public service over time, yet no one actually seems in the government to have a plan for people. But I'll go to my very last question. In our last exchange when you were here, I brought up an individual who's on the Infrastructure Bank Board. You're the Deputy Prime Minister. You hold significant influence in Cabinet. Has this individual, Ms. Andre-Lise Mateau, has she been asked to leave the Infrastructure Bank Board, and are you concerned about the standard that this is setting for people who serve on our Crown corporations?
In your previous question, Mr. Chambers, you didn't specify that you were concerned with the public service. You just talked about employment in Canada, and of course my objective is to have more Canadians have good jobs. The budget does, though, make clear that we believe that it's important when it comes to the public service to have a leveling off. And you will see clearly in the budget text that we're going to see the size of the public service over time decrease by 5,000 employees. That is absolutely appropriate. It is part of responsible fiscal management.